Hey, welcome to another edition of Kyle Meredith with the interview series presented by WFPK at WFPK.org, Consequence of Sound, and the Consequence Podcast Network. You can subscribe at any of the major hotspots as we release 3 new interviews a week. And today I am so happy and honored to have one of the greatest singer-songwriters of all time, Mr. Jimmy Buffett. Hello, sir.
Hey, Kyle. No, that was a great intro. Thank you.
Yeah, anytime. That's all I'm good for. It's really all downhill from here
All right.
as far as the questioning goes. Hey, you got such a great new record, Life on the Flip Side. I know it's been a minute since we've had a brand new album from you, and as you know, this is exactly, I think, what we've all been waiting for. You knocked it out of the park on this one.
Well, thanks a lot. You know, I have a lot of help, and it was kind of a labor of love because like you said, we haven't done anything in like 7 years. It's not that we haven't done anything. Fortunately, we were quite busy, but between like the transitions of how music was being sent out, and the fact that I was busy working on our musical for that time, which took a lot more of my time creatively than I thought. But I enjoyed the process. All of a sudden, that was a 5-year process from the beginning of the concept to it leaving go to Broadway, leaving Broadway, and going back on the road. Mm-hmm. And so, but the band, we'd always been playing, and we wanted to do an album to go out on tour with. So that's pretty common sense in this business. So we had the time to do it, and we were all charged up. We went to the Key West and did it down there because it was kind of nice to go back to where it all started in White Sport Coat. And we had this idea to go back there in our little studio that a lot of other people use and works for us too. So we did it in January and we got it all ready to go, and just in time for the pandemic. So I still thought, knowing that I thought we had a great bunch of songs, and also knowing that, being lucky to have this job for so long, I know that a lot of people consider our music something that helps them get through tough times, or as well as having fun. So, these are pretty tough times, and little did we know that it would wind up, being heard by a lot more people and be more popular. But I'm thankful for that, and I hope it helps.
Yeah. Hey, you talk about being more popular. I mean, you landed at number 2 on the album charts, right behind Lady Gaga. That was the only thing in your way.
Well, I like Lady Gaga. She, through it all, I've been more of a performer than anything else, because that was the only, when people weren't playing my records a lot back in those days, but I knew that I could get on stage and play. So I kind of admire people that really have performance chops as well as can write well. And she does that. And, it's nice to be 73 and come in second to Lady Gaga.
It's definitely no consolation prize right there.
No, I like it. I like it a lot.
Yeah. It makes sense, though. It is a great album. You said something a minute ago, and I think it's really important to emphasize here, too. You said because people do find, several things in your records. One, something to turn to in maybe troubled times, and to have fun. And that's what I noticed in a lot of your older songs. It's what I noticed in a handful of songs on this record, too. It's almost like a very thin line that you draw. Like, this is a fun record, and there are fun songs. Just have fun songs on it. You also tackle some big subjects. I take a song like Slack Tide, and this is, I think, one of your great songwriting tricks is you're saying some big statements in here, but you always, right before that wave crests anyway, you throw a little of the beach humor in there or whatever, and you just, is that something that's conscious to you? Does something you make sure that when you're writing a song like that?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. That is my favorite song on the album, because yes, I was very conscious of doing it, because I think that's the thing to me that, it'd been a long time, and there were some things. It was interesting because I'm a great admirer of Bob Marley as a writer as well as a performer. And if you think about the songs that he wrote, he was talking then about social injustices, but it's one love, one heart. You learn that little trick, and not only him, but he was kind of the master of taking difficult material, but making people listen to it through a song that they were kind of, the messages in the verses and the fun is in the choruses. But he was so an expert in doing that. And I always love songs like that I listen to. And you can find it in good songwriters that can do that, don't beat people over the head with messages, but they get in sublimity. And yeah, that was totally a conscious effort, because I was thinking about it, that as a fisherman and in love with the ocean, even the sharks and red snappers swim around together at slack tide in the middle of the feeding frenzy. So us creatures that are descended from amphibians, maybe we should try that a little more.
Yeah, I even took, what I took from that song anyway. One of the messages, everything changes, embrace it. I don't know if
Yeah.
that's what you were going for there, but it's one of those, like, obviously we weren't talking about what we're talking about now with the pandemic when you wrote
No.
that. That
Yeah.
wasn't, no one knew, but now that we're in that, like, that's what's speaking to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just thought that was the last line is, I wish the whole wide world could learn to live at slack tide. That's just, we can learn to be nicer to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Even sharks and snappers do it for a few minutes.
Well, I'll pull out another song too, and I'm wondering, if I'm pushing too far on this one, because
Okay.
15 Cuban Minutes also does a similar thing to me. And I guess I'm taking this a little bit from the excellent liner notes that's provided within the 64-page booklet. Let me point that out for anyone who hasn't picked this up yet. Really, really good stuff, because, you talk about in the booklet a melting pot, that I think you said the Gulf, this is not an American lake.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Well, there's a great book called it's America's Sea is what they call it, but it's, growing up on the Gulf of Mexico on the northern edge, there was always Caribbean influence, and I grew up in a sailing family. My grandfather was a sailing ship captain, and his ports of call were from the Caribbean down to South America. So I grew up with stories and knowing geography and wanting to go there and figuring out a way to do it. I always thought I'd probably do it as a naval officer on a ship, but I never knew that I'd get to do it with a guitar. So that kind of worked out. But, those kind of stories. And 15 Cuban Minutes was actually a good friend of mine whose family are from Cuba originally, and he's living in Miami now. But his name is Enrico Marcione, and he's an actor. Did you ever watch Bloodlines?
I've only seen it a little bit. I can't.
He was in the first original couple of shows, but he's in a lot of other stuff. He's a longtime friend of my daughter's, and I met Enrique through him. And I needed because I'd been to Cuba because I went on some songwriting kind of exchange programs, and I also always loved the history of Key West and Cuba and the way it entered into my family, because my grandfather, I said, is a sailing ship captain. My dad and my aunt were little babies, and they went with my grandmother on the ship in those days. And then there was a captain's house in Havana where they lived time to time. So I'd heard all those stories too. So, I thought, there's so much, it's like any place else, but, times aren't exactly rosy in Cuba right now, but boy, they use their music as a way to get them through it, which is like, growing up on the Gulf Coast, Mardi Gras was the same thing to me. So, and the pandemic now, it's the same thing. Everybody who's playing, I think, gets a sense of what it means to other people to hear it. And they know, I know, speaking for myself, and I think most artists, we all want to get back and play to our fans as much as they want us to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to share that, like, intimately, like with these things we're doing here, or like some of we've got a thing called the Cabin Fever Meet and Greet, a virtual show where we play on Fridays to first responders and healthcare workers who are in the line of duty, but we know are fans, and that, again, we're going back to, music really helps that whole thing. So, in 15 Cuban Minutes, the Cuban people, there's not much else to do, but they dance themselves away. And Enrique knew about it and helped me with my Spanish, and gave me some great little metaphors, like there's always a birthday but never any cake. But that's like a metaphor. So it's like you have to laugh a little bit at the absurdity of serious things sometimes, and it helped. Yeah. So, and I'd been on the Malecon, and there's no, nightlife there as people go out on the street, have a little rum, they dance on that big, beautiful street right on the edge of the Gulf Stream. And it's pretty amazing to watch that in action. and that's where that song came from. And the title, at one point, Enrique's always a little late for things, and we were going fishing or something. I went, come on, man, we're late. He said, I'll be there in 15 Cuban minutes. I went, what's that? He said, it's an hour, it's a day. And that's where I got it from.
It's a bit like when you hear about Island Time, basically.
Yeah. It's that.
Yeah. And again, I don't want to push this
faster.
I don't want to push this in a direction maybe it wasn't meant to go, but kind of finishing my point on something like that, this is a story. It's a really good story, and it's a human story. But considering, when you look around the geopolitical nature, whatever, and the current administration's talking about immigration the way, does this become a political song? Do you ever mean it to be a protest song in those ways?
No, I just mean it to be that music has always been a part of social change. Mm-hmm. Going back to the 60s as a hippie and Bob Dylan, and the times they are changing, you could apply that to everything in the past decades that I've been alive. Each decade probably had some kind of horrible thing that we needed to change. Mm-hmm. And that's just part of life. And, I think we'll be better for it all. I really do. And so this song is, I think of it more as of the way the Cubans do it. I mean, and it's, but I wrote it I wrote it in a way for as many of my friends that live in Miami as I do with my friends in Havana, because they're all basically the same people, and eventually we all get back to that again, slack tide,
Slack tide.
Try to find those. There's one line in Slack Tide that it was like, if you'll cut me some slack, I'll do you a favor. Pull down that bottle of fine rum, and together we will savor. That kind of says it for me.
Yeah.
If we could do that, that's our Slack Tide.
You said hippie culture, and it's not far from surfer culture. Let's see if I can say that one right, like that. Which as strong as ever on this album. And sort of sticking with the theme that we're going here, here we are also in big environmental conversations. You probably see this a lot more than we do up here in Louisville or whatever. But that conversation seems to be really happening again. Do you find that as encouraging? When you've got Greta doing her thing and whatnot?
I do. I think that technology and science is going to, if we just let it happen, plus if you look at it historically, you've seen it. There's economical advantages to being socially responsible and environmentally responsible, and like Moore's law, everything changes every 4 years. Everything ups and and as a pilot and as a real believer that going to space is not a useless thing, because everything we do today, you and I doing this Zoom concert, came out of going to the moon and creating the technology to do that. And I think a lot of people, and I'm one of those that says, it's kind of good that the race to get a vaccine is like going to the moon, but it's, it's an evil enemy that we can't shoot guns at. So we got to figure out how to do it. And I'm glad to hear that, though it's a race, everybody's sharing material, and it seems to be going faster than people thought. And that's my hope.
Yeah.
And environmentally, we look at it. Clean energy is vital to our survival. That's what I think.
It's easy as said, and I appreciate that that coming from that as well. We'll go a little bit easier on the topic right now, because I don't want to take away from the other side of this record. First of all, I love that you start out the booklet with, I think it was like, who the hell is Paul Brady? We're really familiar with Paul Brady here in Louisville. At the WFPK, we're big fans of that song, The World Is What You Make It. And I hadn't even looked at the track list when I hit play on the album. So it was quite a surprise when that song came up, and I stopped and I went, wait a second, and then started doing the reading. What's the story with you and Paul? Because what an amazing songwriter.
And one of the things about this that I'm so glad is this album is doing so well for Mac and for Utley. The producers have been with you forever, and Will Kimbrough, my fellow Mobilian, who's one of my go-to songwriter buddies. And Paul Brady came into the equation because of that song. I listened. What happened was last year when we went to Europe, we go every year to Paris. we'll miss this year. We'll be back next year. But this year we went to Dublin for the first time. We went back to London. We hadn't played in a while. So when I went to Ireland, and like a lot of places when you tour Australia, New Zealand, they make you as part of policy that you can't bring an opening act. You have to use a local opening act, which I think is a great thing to do.
Yeah.
So so I didn't know whether that was going to apply to England or not, but I knew that in Ireland it was. So Mark Knopfler and I are old friends and go back a long way. And I was a fan before we became friends because I think he's one of the best songwriter guitar players that ever walked the planet.
Absolutely.
And in every genre of music, you know, I mean, one of my favorite albums is him and Chet Atkins doing duets together, you know. So I called him and I said, you know us, and you know your band, most of your band's from Nashville when you go on the road, and Eric Darkin, my percussionist, plays for. We got a lot of intermingling between our two bands, and I said, you know, who do you think? And before I got the sentence out, Kyle, he said Paul Brady, and I said, I know he did an album with Bonnie Raitt. I knew him he had some Nashville connections with Jerry Douglas and some people, and Sharon Vaughn, who wrote one of the songs with him. And I said, okay. And then I started listening. And I was in California at the time, and I was kind of driving between town and going out to Malibu to surf. And I just kept putting it on. But when I heard "The World Is What You Make It," I went, that's such a simple statement without beating people over the head. But it is, responsibility is ours. But I just love that song. We started doing that song on last year's tour. Before we went to, in the summer before we went to Europe, and I started listening to the other stuff, and Oceans of Time that he wrote, and that's the song he wrote with Sharon Vaughn, who's from Nashville. So I mean, you know all these songs, but I was discovering what a great songwriter he was before I ever met him. We had a internet and a phone conversation setting it all up. So I'll tell you a real quick funny story. So after Mark told me about it, he gave me his numbers, and I called, and I finally got Paul on the phone. I said, I got your number from Mark, and I asked him about, and we're looking for an opening act, and we're playing the Olympia in Dublin, and I didn't know if you were free, but we'd love to have you come open for us. And he started laughing in the phone. He went, "Oh, Jimmy, the Olympia is a great place. I don't know about opening. You see, the last time I did it, I did 10 sold out shows there." I mean, I went, "Hey, stupid, why didn't you look?" And I went, and I know why, because he's so connected, and he's such a charming Irishman with an exquisite knack for songwriting, which the Irish love. So when we met, we immediately, it's like one of those friends that, you meet the first time and you've known them 40 years. Mm-hmm. That's the way I felt about it. And he came out and did some pop-up shows with us in Dublin and in London. And then by the time I got back to the States, there was a tape for me, and it was La Di Da. And he wrote it thinking about me, and he said, well, I don't know if I finished it right or all, but I said, well, yeah, let me just play with it a little bit. So he started it, and I finished it. And when I heard it, I said, look, I was lucky enough to write a really good bar song, and this one's right there with it. And it's had that kind of reaction from other people too. Mm-hmm. You don't have to really sell it. It'll do what it does, whether people play it or not. But boy, I know that I'm going to do that song. When we were working on the set list for the Slack Tide tour, we were going to open the show with a brand new song because we thought people would be singing it by the time we got to the end of it. Absolutely. And that's how much I think of his songwriting.
Yeah. No, that song is an instant Buffett style classic right there. I mean, what's the number you're up to? The classic, what is it, 10, 12 now or something? So you gotta add one more.
Oh, yeah. Well, you can rotate. There's about 10 classics, and there's a couple of rotators in there. Mm-hmm. So I'd say 13 to 14. You got to swim around in that pool a lot. You can go into the deep end occasion, but you got to kind of stay in the shallow end to kind of do it. Because look, that's. Like I said, again, I don't write these. This is in the last song that Mac and Mike Utley's kids started writing, a book on the shelf, and I don't write them for me. I write them for you. I mean, that's the way I feel about it. And once those songs are out there, because people get to make, to use them in any way they want, and to remind them of whatever, because it's what the inspiration was to me, to write it in some way. If I connect up, the inspiration is there, but everybody seems to have, a place of their own where they heard that song, and then you become part of their remembrances of good times. And that's a nice transition, I think.
Power of music right there. Absolutely. Over and over again.
Yeah.
But
So I don't get tired. People say, you ever get tired of doing Margaritaville? I went, no, because let's say, hey, it pays the rent, and that I'm not paid to get up there, and people are paying direct money to a performer to be entertained. Mm-hmm. So it's, to me, it's never been as much about pleasing myself or doing what I want to do, my version of me on the stage. That's not what I'm there to do. I'm there to do your version of me. And occasionally, don't worry, I can still slip in a little, we've done this for long enough to know that we can place things. But interestingly enough, when we get around to doing this tour, and we will get out there when it's safe, and and when and where that is, it's going to be a hell of a first show, I'll tell you that. But we already were thinking about 4 slots for new songs for this album, which we had never done before. That because to me, it's got to be familiarity, and energy is the way you write a set list to take people up and down energy wise. But they also want to hear stuff that they're familiar with. But I thought getting new stuff in there, these are songs that people are going to pick up. Because when I was first testing it out and sending it to people, that's what was happening. Mm-hmm. And I knew we had that. So we figured that we had 4 slots for new songs in a 26-song show, but we could put 8 songs and rotate them in there. That's the way we really felt about it. And we'll see. Yeah, I think it'll happen. But now everybody will know those 8 songs, so that's good.
It's an extremely strong album that way. And it's funny the way you're talking about those older songs too, because to get very meta for a second, you sort of wrote a song about that in Mailbox Money. And that's one of the things where I saw the title and I laughed out loud, because reading about it, you said you'd first heard that term in Nashville. Yeah. Where I first heard that term, mine was from the country songwriter Earl Bud Lee.
I remember Bud Lee, yeah.
He told me about Mailbox Money, and now I bring that up. I mean, it's a bit of inside baseball for anybody who doesn't know. This is your
the first person that mentioned it to me was, when in my first run through of Nashville, I had one unsuccessful marriage and 3 or 4 unsuccessful careers before I made it out of there, and I had to go to Key West to do that. So, but at one time, the great thing about the earlier years is I try to pass on to young performers and writers, but more so for performers, because you have to be really ready for rejection and for failures, because that is a part of the road to success, a huge part of the road, to be able to deal with that. And those first years, but I'd met Harlan Howard. He came to when I was playing the Exit In, he came among a couple of songwriters, John Loudermilk and Billy Ed Wheeler. Those are guys who were there when I was there, that are more folkies than anything else, but they had a home in Nashville. Listening to those guys talk about and knowing their songs that I did in my set list playing on Bourbon Street, Tobacco Road, Jackson, Harlan Howard, come on, everything out there. But they wound up coming to my shows, and it was Harlan Howard that mentioned. I thought he was the ideal Mailbox Money guy that was so good at it, but he loved to come and perform in little kind of but this is before the Bluebird, so this Exit In was it. He'd come play, and he was an incredible solo performer. You'd think, and he wasn't really, but he was wonderful at it. So, but Mailbox Money was, and I thought, man, I just want to be a Mailbox Money guy, and then I realized, no, I'm really a performer. So when I got to it, and that's when I called Will Kimbrough, and I said, and I got this idea to write a song, because we got the idea talking about it. It was Mac and I were in the studio with Kenny Chesney, and we were doing the backgrounds to Caroline Jones's Gulf Coast Girl. And in the middle of 3 of us sitting in a booth, just, shooting the bull, we started talking about something, and Mailbox Money came up. We just started talking about it. And I took that out of the booth and I started writing. And I told Mac, I said, I got this idea that about mailbox money, and I'd just been back to Alabama to see my sister. And I said, the only mail boat left in America is in Magnolia Springs, Alabama. So what if the guy has a mailbox, but it's delivered by the mail boat? And I said, and then what if the guy decides he's got so much mailbox money and the mailman retires, so he becomes the mailman, riding the mailbox to deliver him his mailbox, he's the mailman driving the mailboat, delivering his own mailbox money. And I can't, but that's what, then I went to Will Kimbrough and I said, we need to take this to the Gulf Coast. And you know that as good as I do. And he did it. And so I love that song. I can't wait to play that song. I play it right now, just a little acoustic part of it. And I know that river very well, and so, and I just think, and then again, if you listen to that, that's a little bit of that Chet, Knopfler kind of style of picking, that Chet Atkins kind of groove. That's a little tribute to them.
Oh, it's a fun one. I'll bring up one more name that kind of goes along with that too, because mutual friend of your mine, the late great Tim Krekel, he had told me one time about if you can get just one hit every 10 years, your mailbox money will take care of itself for life. So it's
well, Tim Krekel played with us for a long, long time, and he was one of the great. It's amazing to still be here at this time, Kyle. But think about. At one point, I look at all the wonderful people that have come through the Coral Reefer Band. And if you look at the list, it's quite shocking at times, from Tim. Tim played with us for a long time. Then he went out and wanted to do his own thing, but we always remained friends. And, Steve Cropper played one year. Timmy Schmidt was in the Memphis Horns. And the people that are still there now, Larry Lee played in the band, but there are a lot of people have come through the Coral Reefer Band. Two of the Meters from New Orleans were in the band at one time. So I just love having that cultural diversity in the band of people of music from everywhere, because again, growing up on the Gulf Coast and going to New Orleans and really being, my music at the time went from like Hank Williams to, Fats Domino, and that's what I listen to between that, and I think it shows. Somewhere between all that, I'm wiggling around.
It's made for great music, over and over and over. So we know obviously the touring doesn't happen until the touring eventually happens. You had mentioned you've been doing these Zoom concerts and chats with frontline medical workers. Are those still continuing? Do you still have more of those? We're going to start them back up again, because we just we had to do some other things, and we kind of had to put it on hold for a little while. Once I had to move back from West Coast here, that was the main thing, because I'd been in California when this happened. I have two kids out there, and I was out there visiting them, and we have a little place there that my wife likes to spend more of the winter out there, and so we were there. And then once it happened, it was one of the silver linings of this whole thing was I got to spend a whole lot of more time with two of my kids than I probably would have ever done for the rest of my life had this not happened. And it was wonderful doing that. And so, but coming back and getting reestablished here, that took some time out of it. And we're going to go back to doing them. And then, and we're looking at some other ideas of finding safe places where we can play, and in the virtual world now. So, where we could still play to, I'll give the same show to 2 people that I will to 20,000 people. That's just the way I feel about it. And people ask me, what would it be like anybody not coming to the theater? I went, I've been there. I've done it. I've gone and done a show and nobody showed up. And they went, and I said, well, the owner said, play for the bartenders and the waitresses. And I did, And so I believe that having had that experience, that a little bit of human feedback with a few people there can translate virtually. So we're looking at trying to keep doing things for first responders and healthcare workers that, because a Zoom is a finite number of things you can do. You can't overdo it. But
again, we've got Margaritaville TV and radio that we started a long time ago. We can use those existing platforms to get this out. And, we're rerunning shows. We've taped everything for 30 years. And so we kind of put together with my video department what we thought were the best shows out there. And we've been putting them up twice a week, and they average 55,000 people a night are watching. So you've still got people captive, and with all the spikes going on, it doesn't look like people are we got to get control of this thing, it looks like, and then try it again, going back out, but not as crazy as some people did in the past. So you've still got a pretty captive audience. And we know that from our fans, because in our case, they knew we weren't coming back out to play at least till the spring, and hopefully by then. And so they already figured out that the money they'd have spent going to get a ticket, they bought a new barbecue, or they got the backyard set up. So they're tailgating in their backyards. And we know that from them telling us. And we're playing right to that market.
Yeah,
that's what we're doing, and I know from a lot of people, and to say that 50,000 or 100,000 people a week are tuning in, it's a lot of people. And they're kind of happy with that, because I don't want to give them a half-ass show, because, if you can't tailgate going to Jimmy Buffett show, what are you going to start with, And I'm very aware of that, and that's part of the whole thing. So I think we got to be wholly ourselves in every aspect of touring before we go back up there. And I have a pretty good idea that our wonderful fans will wait for that. And in the meantime, we'll do as much as we can to give them a fun in their backyards.
I know they appreciate it. I'll wrap up with this one. Which do you think we'll see first? You and the band back on stage, or the Heat back on the court?
You kind of cut out. What was the first part of that?
I said, which do you think we'll see first? You back on the stage, or the Heat back on the court?
I think you're gonna see me back on the stage before the Heat get back on the court. But man, I was so looking forward to that system, because your Kentucky kid, hero is we had, and then and we had some great Kentucky players on that team. Not to put Louisville aside, but man, I was looking forward to this season. But they'll play when they're ready. But I think we'll get on stage before them.
Before it happens. You might be right. You really might be. I think you will be, honestly.
I hope so. I hope they get back too.
Yeah. Jimmy, thank you so much again for taking the time to talk about this today. Life on the Flip Side. Seriously, you've made a classic record. That's not easy to do, much, and you've absolutely done it.
Well, thanks for a great interview. It's really been great. I sometimes you get people and you do them, and then it's like when I do TV ones, when I had the book, and they go, "Well, Jimmy, tell us what this is all about." And you'd go, "He didn't read it."
Didn't read it.
But thanks for a great kind of throw a wide net there of things, and I just really enjoyed doing it and talking to you. And all the best.
Same to you. Likewise. Take care.
Okay, take care. Fins up.
Bye.